Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78 on Chicago's South Side at 2120 South Michigan Avenue, home to the legendary Chess Records, part of Old Motor Row and also part of Old Record Row, which I didn't know existed. But either way, Chuck Berry, Howlin Wolf, Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, Bo Diddley, Buddy Guy, and of course the Stones recorded here. We're going to hear from Janine about the history of this place now for the story from the 78.
All right, so take a look at this. Since 1956, a recording studio right here on Michigan Avenue. I'm here with my friend Janine. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thanks
for coming.
Absolutely. So you are the historian of this place, or you know a lot about this place, I should say. What is your proper title?
I'm the executive director of Willie Dixon's Blues Heaven Foundation.
Which is in the old Chess Records building.
Correct.
One of two, correct?
Well, there were several Chess Records locations, but this was the most significant and the most popular of those.
And you were talking earlier that this is among many that used to be on Michigan Avenue here called Record Row, which I think a lot of people don't realize how much of the music industry was right here on Chicago's South Side.
Correct. From Cermak Road, 8 blocks north to Roosevelt, it was known as Record Row back in the 1950s, early 60s, because there were so many buildings to do with the industries down those blocks, including BJ Records, Brunswick Records, OK Records, King Records, Constellation Records, several others, and of course Chess. Chess was the most popular and the most successful of those labels back then.
And
this remains the only building that remains intact of Record Row and the only one that continues to bring music to the world from its space today.
And it's a pretty historical building. There have been some legendary artists that perform here. But why don't you walk through, so for people that have never been here before, when you walk in for a tour, because you're interested about learning about the music that was here, there's lots of different music that was here. Why don't you just walk through the beginning steps when you walk into the place and talk about the music that was here and go from there on like what a tour would be.
Well, the front lobby area is where you would wait for an audition or an appointment. The receptionist that you would have likely been greeted by back in the early 60s was Minnie Ripperton. She had a very big hit called Loving You. She's also the mother of Maya Rudolph, the actor-comedian. Unfortunately, Minnie passed of breast cancer at 31 years old, but she was not just a receptionist, also a backup vocalist. We also take you through to our Blues Heaven Gallery, which used to be the shipping room for Chess. We rotate our exhibits in that room, and we also have some of our museum exhibits in that area as well. Then we bring you up to the studios. Studio B, we've dedicated to Mr. Willie Dixon. We have his upright K bass in that room and several of his awards, including the Songwriters Hall of Fame Award that he received posthumously through his daughter Jacqueline in 2015, his Grammy Award for his album Hidden Charms, and various other memorabilia pieces in that room, including handwritten lyrics by Mr. Dixon.
You talked about him being the hoochie coochie man. Talk about that story and his presence when he was in a room.
Willie Dixon was the original hoochie coochie man. Many people know that song. Muddy Waters recorded it. Willie was about 6'4", 300 pounds, or as he said, built for comfort, not for speed. Willie Dixon was also an amateur boxing glove champion, and he was one of Joe Louis's sparring partners. That was until he discovered his manager was making more money on the fights than he was, and they got into a fight in the commissioner's office, who promptly suspended Willie, thank goodness. Willie Dixon went on to write over 6,000 songs in his lifetime, and we are still finding and counting them.
You said 6,000.
6,000. Jacqueline Dixon, our current president, Willie's youngest daughter and last remaining child of Willie and Marie, sent me one of Willie's black derby hats from California, and on the inside lid of the hat box, Mr. Dixon had written a song that has not been published yet.
That's incredible. And you mentioned a story about certain artists in that room where that is now that space that you just mentioned. He had to do a song, rehearse it 40 times to come in this room to record it. You would tell that one.
That room, Studio B, was often used as a rehearsal space for Chess. And it happens to be the very spot where Willie Dixon had Chuck Berry rehearse Johnny Be Good 40 times before he finally said, okay, Chuck, sounds good. Let's go put it on tape in the next room.
Unbelievable. And Johnny, his keyboard player, Chuck Berry's keyboard player.
It was written for Johnny Johnson. The song is actually about Johnny Johnson, not a guitar player, as the song depicts.
Ah, that's unbelievable. And then you get into this space here. Before we get into the bands that rehearse here, outside of what we just talked about, talk about why this space is so unique.
It's actually The only place in the world that was intentionally designed and built to bring blues and therefore rock and roll to the world. As Muddy Waters said, the blues had a baby and they named it rock and roll. Well, that baby was kind of born right here in this room where we're standing.
Wow. From the vaulted ceilings to the slanted wall, everything with purpose, designed by a 23-year-old?
Correct. The Chess brothers hired Jack Sheldon Weiner, 23 years old in 1956, to design, build, and manage this studio. It's a room built within a room, and he did remarkable things. At that time, keep in mind, technology had yet to advance beyond 6 tracks before they moved out of this building. And acoustics were very new back then as well. So he did a lot of remarkable things to make this room one of the best sounding studios in the world. People to this day want to record in this room for that reason.
And this is in the mid-50s when he designed it and then put the finishing touches on it.
Correct. This was in 1956 when they started building this room within a room.
And talk about the Chess brothers, first of all, because you mentioned a very unique trait of theirs in what they, how they related to a Rolling Stones album that used the address of this place. But before we get to the Stones story, talk about the Chess brothers and what they had to overcome to be here to have this recording studio.
The Chess brothers came from Motol, Poland, which is now part of Belarus. They were joining their father and grandfather, who had already come to Chicago to start various businesses. They were young boys who were expected to help out when they weren't in school. At that time, it was a junkyard kind of scrap metal business. But the boys were often found sitting on the curb across the street listening to gospel music bellowing from the church there. As they grew, they bought into a liquor store business and eventually a nightclub called the Macombo Lounge. It had almost 24/7 live entertainment. And at one point, someone came in and said they wanted to record the musicians. But Leonard, being the businessman he was, said, hold on a minute, not so fast. I'm going to learn about this and make some money off of it.
Wow.
So he was actually friends and played poker in a group with a lady named Evelyn Ahrens. She and her husband Charles owned Aristocrat Records. Leonard bought in as a partner to learn about the business, and then the Ahrens were getting a divorce and wanted to sell the label. This was right around the time Phil Chess was getting out of the Army. So he bought the other partners out, and the Chess brothers now acquired Aristocrat Records. Imagine, poor boys from Poland didn't even have indoor plumbing in their home there. Went from a junkyard business to owning a record label in America.
And talk about the significance of the address of their first home to what the Stones did.
Well, it wasn't what the Stones did.
Or what they
it was
later
their
called.
first release. They held on to the Aristocrat label for about 3 years and then decided in 1950 to change the name to Chess. That was derived from their name in Polish, Chish. Their first release, they chose a beautiful song, an instrumental called My Foolish Heart, recorded by Gene Ammons, wonderful saxophonist. And every song, even today, needs a corresponding catalog number to it. For their first release on their new Chess label, they chose the catalog number 1425. They wanted to honor the fact that they lived in America. That was the address of their first home in America, 1425 South Carleb Avenue. So every song went on from there, from 1425 up.
And talk about the relation to the Rolling Stones song.
Well, when the Rolling Stones came here for their first sessions in June of 1964, they recorded a song that became one of the few instrumentals the Rolling Stones have done. The rumor is that it originally had some lyrics, but with Willie Dixon, Muddy Waters, and Chuck Berry, not only listening to them in the control room, but also watching them through that window, the story is they got nervous and forgot the words. So it became one of the few instrumentals the Stones have ever done. And to pay homage to this place, they titled it The Address, 2120 South Michigan Avenue.
You imagine being in a room, that particular room on that day, where the Stones are, terrified of who's watching them.
Right.
Like the music, creativity, the energy of that. Oh my gosh, what a palpable feeling that must have been. I
try to imagine being here for many of those sessions, what I wouldn't have given to be here for those sessions.
Well, and talk about that. So we've mentioned the Stones and Chuck Berry, but run through a couple of the other artists that have called this place home for a recording session.
Well, of course, Muddy Waters, Bo Diddley, Etta James recorded At Last, standing right about where you see Willie Dixon's microphone in the center of the room here.
Wow.
Mitty Collier, again, Chuck Berry, so many.
What's your favorite?
I have some partialness to Etta.
Yeah.
And of course, I love Willie Dixon. Without Willie Dixon, a lot of these people probably wouldn't have become who they are today.
Well, and talk about that a little bit too, just because Willie Dixon kind of was like the go-to for the Chess Brothers to get, we need this kind of artist to mix with this kind of song. He knew how that would work. He was the arranger, composer. He made Chuck Berry practice Johnny B. Good 40 times before he even started recording it. He was the heartbeat of this place.
Right. Willie Dixon was very instrumental in helping chess to be a success, not only in writing for them, but bringing many artists to chess that became stars in their own rights as well.
And you mentioned earlier some of these artists that were residents here, and I mean residents as just they were here a lot, not necessarily resident recordings, but they dressed to the nines, some of these gentlemen, where even when the Stones would show up, the Stones, that's why they were impressed. And it kind of probably set this tone, this era of what Chess Records was.
Well, as a matter of fact, the Rolling Stones dressed to the nines when they came here as well. Many of them had not really worn suits and ties before, but they showed up in their finest attire as well.
Ah, that's a great story. So you take folks through this room here, and you're restoring it now. You had to shut it down during the pandemic, but then you use that time to kind of restore it back to what it used to be, right?
Right. Before Mrs. Dixon acquired the building in March of '93, it was owned by Gerald Sims, a sessions player for chess. Unfortunately, he did some changes in the building, including removing all of the acoustic panels that lined the south wall. We are currently in the process of restoring those panels. The original ones can be seen in photographs taken by Bob Bonas, the American tour manager for the Rolling Stones in 1964. Many of those photographs are what we've relied upon to start the restoration of those panels today.
And today also you are offering the space up for tours for people to come and listen to some of the music. I know you play a lot of the music during the tour when you're walking around, and also music that was recorded in this room with outtakes and everything from that control room there to what happened in this very room.
Yes, when people come, we want them to have the feeling that they're coming to the Chess Records studio, perhaps for their own auditions or a session. Walking through the lower level, we've kept some museum pieces down there, but when you get up to the studio, we want you to feel as if you are back in the 1950s and 60s. When we do the tour, we also play samples of the music that was recorded here. Again, much of it written by Willie Dixon. And we also have our guests sit in the studio to hear music that was actually recorded in this room. Some of them have outtakes that are wonderful for people to hear what the atmosphere was like in this room. When our guests leave, we hope they'll recognize this room as an instrument on every track ever recorded here, because indeed it is. And to allow them to do that, how could we without giving them some wonderful music to hear as well?
And there's some Easter eggs if people are, nerds for maybe the way something's designed. From the stairwell even, when people walk up the stairwell, the space had very purposeful design. And like you said, we're speaking about how the studio is above the actual main level of the building, and it's insulated in a way that maybe people aren't familiar with because you can't see it, but talk about that.
Well, keep in mind, this studio was designed, built, and managed by Jack Sheldon Weiner, 23 years old in 1956. Technology was still developing with acoustics back then. They were working with different microphones, tape machines, lathes, but acoustic treatment in rooms was fairly new as well, so they were experimenting with different techniques. Jack Sheldon Weiner got this room just right. There's interviews that Bo Diddley did talking about musicians from around the world said they couldn't get better sound from drums and bass than they could right here. A big factor for that is the design of this room, especially the ceiling he put in. You'll notice there's very few right angles in this room, and you'll see that in many studios. There are not many right angles because it traps those sound waves. This room, again, was one of the places everybody wanted to record to get that chess sound, which even the Stones wanted to do. Well, that chess sound is certainly the artists, the musicians that recorded here, as well as the engineers who were experimenting with different microphones, different tape machines, etc. But it was very much so the design of this room. I collect vinyl, and I've gotten to the point now, listening to vinyl, listening to analog, you can kind of hear it. I don't really hear it in digital, but I've gotten to the point where I can recognize the sound of the room in recordings.
Really?
Listen to Stax, listen to Sun, listen to Motown, and give it a try. Then listen to this room. I'm a bit partial, but I feel that the recordings done in this studio had a warmer, fuller, rounder sound.
Yeah, you're mentioning hinges on the walls, the floor had a cork material. One of the sound, you talked about gobos, right? Where
Right.
it would, instruments that would let sound in, and you say it better than I could ever say because I don't even know what it is.
Again, they were all experimenting with different acoustic treatments back then. Technology had not advanced beyond 6 tracks until they moved out of this building in '67. A lot of sessions were done live here out of necessity because you only had 6 microphones to work with.
Wow.
But also, these were professionals. They were used to playing live, so a lot of the tracks were done live. The room itself was, again, designed, built, and managed by Jack Sheldon Weiner, who was a young 23-year-old engineer who was learning from other engineers in other studios, particularly Bill Putnam with Universal Studio, where Frank Sinatra recorded a lot. But this room, again, he put some different applications in that I've not seen in other studios. Chess was actually one of the first studios to put their windows on the control room on an angle as well.
Really?
Because it breaks the sound waves up better than a flat surface. Wow. So yes, under your feet there's 3 inches of cork, 4 inches of cement to soundproof from below. Above he put in a vaulted ceiling, which had a huge effect on the drums and bass. The north wall has something called pyro brick installed in between the wall, plus a gap for air, a board through the center. Then it repeats on the other side, so that whole wall is built like what they now call gobos or go-betweens, which prevents sound from going in and sound from going out of the room. The south wall was a remarkable application where he put these panels in, including some that were on hinges that open and close to tune the room. When they're all closed, it has an absorptive effect, and when you open one panel, you get a reflective surface, allowing that sound wave to bounce back, giving you a different acoustic sound. Thus, the sound of the recording would be different.
You know,
So, some remarkable things at 23 years old, right?
yeah, and it really goes to show you the difference between music today versus music back then and how they had to record it.
Today, you can record a whole album sitting on your bed with a laptop.
And make 100 mistakes and you wouldn't never know, where back then you kind of had to do it all in one take when you had the whole band in here, right?
But the thing about recording in this room as well, even today, it's not just the technology that they developed back then, but the mojo, the vibe is still here in this building. We have artists come here and they feel it. It's palpable. You really can feel those who came before us. If you think about the music that was recorded in this room, it truly was music that helped change the world.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important that when people come here, you're a nonprofit, you know, so everything goes back into the entire organization. So how can people get tickets for the tours and all that stuff?
Sure. The Blues Heaven Foundation was started by Willie Dixon in 1982 with the mission to promote, protect, and preserve blues. We adhere to that mission for the foundation by holding tours to educate people about the history of blues, its present, and hopefully its future. We hold tours Tuesday through Saturday by reservation only currently, and those are between the noon hour and 4 o'clock. You can obtain a reservation by calling 312-808-1286 or going to our website, bluesheaven.com. You can send an email to info@bluesheaven.com as well.
Well, thank you so much for your time and a wonderful brief tour. I encourage people to come out here and experience the tour in person with you. So thank you so much.
We appreciate it. Again, we're a nonprofit 501c3 educational foundation, and every dollar we make goes back into helping us maintain this historic landmark or our various programs. So we appreciate you coming out to see us. Thanks so much.
Sure, no problem.